Kristi, I think you should do the intro since you're the one that discovered Mark.
Well, let's see. We're
Was I
going to end.
discovered? I love that.
You were discovered, Mark. It was like kismet that we found you, quite honestly. I think because at that time, Sinclair was really, really hardcore. She was like, I'm going to Georgetown. I'm going
Yeah.
to Georgetown. I'm going to Georgetown. And so we investigated DC. We were there. We're doing the research. And that was kind of at the same time that we're like, okay, this podcasting is going to happen. And you got online and you started researching and you go, oh, I just found the oracle. I found the guy. I got a guy for everything. And she goes, he's it. He lives in Santa Monica. He's a professor of podcasting at Georgetown. He is going to be the ones to take us from zero to hero.
You know what? And they are the loveliest students you could imagine. No.
Oh, not us, your other students.
Oh, of course, both of you. Yeah.
For as many people as we've had reach out and say, okay, well, how do you do the podcast? Like, I honestly feel like we've probably had at least a dozen people reach out and say, I've been thinking about starting a podcast.
Yeah. How hard
is it? Or like, what all do you need? I think, Mark, you should give all the listeners a little bit of background about how you came to be at this place in your career and what knowledge you have that gives you the tools you need
to makes you our guru.
Yeah.
Well, I was 30 years in broadcasting. I was 30 years in television and radio. And the BBC, I worked for many, many years, one day decided that, it was a good idea that everybody in TV worked in radio and everybody in radio went across to do TV, And not all of us had a face for TV, but it kind of worked, And we kind of, so one of my first jobs in the BBC really was kind of teaching TV people how radio was different and vice versa. And so when the internet, came together and YouTube came up and all of that kind of thing, it was obvious to me that, there was a lot of people with a lot of things to say and a lot of people who are curious there to enable others to speak. And so at the time I was working at the NPR station in Washington, D.C., and I'd been kind of over-promoted, beyond my capabilities. And so I was dealing with a lot of human resources issues and management issues, and I wasn't really enjoying it all that much anymore and wanted to get back into the studios. And so one of the things that I thought was, why don't I start a business where I can actually help real people to communicate digitally? To use these tools, to use podcasting, to use YouTube, to use video, to start their own channels, to pursue their own interests, to have their own guests, to find their own tribes. And so that's what I did back in 2014, and that's how I landed up doing what I'm doing, whatever it is that I'm doing.
Well, but we talk about it. We just talked about it again this morning. It's like if you, it's kind of like we talked about with your heart. Like if you're not solely focused on one entity of media in its fullness, like whether it's podcasting, whether it's social media, content creation, whatever, whether it's Reagan with the videography stuff, you have to be so laser focused in learning all the skills and the tools behind that one thing, or you're out of the game.
Right.
Because it's all changing now so fast.
3 months from now, some technique we use will be antiquated and there'll be something else out there.
Yeah, you have to keep up with it, right? I've been furrowing away at artificial intelligence to see if it can help any of the kind of things that the people I work with are doing, And the answer mostly is not yet, because if you put, if you for instance want AI to write show notes for you, it comes up with the most comical kind of sort of commercialized solutions that you could possibly imagine. Not the kind of thing that you would write from your heart or write from your own creativity by yourself. There are AI programs now where, you could send off your recorded video or your recorded audio, send it off to an AI program and have them take out all the ums and the ahs, take out the gaps, remove bad sound. But you know what? When it comes back, it's not quite right. It's choppy and churny and iffy and take out some bits that you wanted to keep in.
But they're going to perfect it.
Well, eventually, I think so.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
I have no doubt.
And I find that happening. My role, I mean, you guys know I do editing, I do launches, startups, consulting, marketing, I do editing. I think for people like me, the editing side of it is going to be increasingly taken away by machines. And so I'm sort of desperately hoping that the consulting side of it will still be needed, because
Right.
people will need to know how to get started and how to get off the ground and how to express themselves, in a kind of sincere, authentic way.
Well, and it's so multifaceted from shooting the content originally and then editing that down, and then, like you said, doing the audio, like backtracking, like making sure all of that's where it needs to be, uploading it to all the different media stations, making sure you're not rule breaking, because there's a whole host of rules based on which platform you're going to, and those were things that you and I never even
No, like
realized.
words that you can and can't use, so you won't get shadow banned. I mean, there's
But it's also, there's a sense of nobody really knows where the rules actually sit.
no. We had
one
a
of the-
meeting this morning and they said the same thing. And I said, is there a list of words? And they said, no, you just have to use.
Oh, Reagan says she's looked for the list of words. It's true. Because
Reagan, the Wonder producer, just chimed in and said she too looked for the list. They don't tell you.
I teach my students the FCC regulations, Federal Communications Commission regulations, and these days those only apply to radio stations and TV stations that hold licenses, that have permission to broadcast within a certain range. And the FCC, bless them, does actually have a list of words that you can't use.
Well, yeah, we have those
referring-
famous words.
But then, you upload your conversation to the different platforms, and they all have different algorithms which will identify when you're using rude words. Some of them will throw it back at you, and some of them will accept it. It's very
Right.
hard to tell. So anyway, I have pushed us well away from where we were. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sure you still talk to a lot of your compadres back across the pond. What do they think with the political atmosphere that's happening over here right now?
Oh, I think people are as confused and as sort of disappointed as we are, because they see a system that right now is not working. The system that 99% of us at least want to work, called democracy, but that because of the paralysis in Congress, and so often, although they refuse to admit it, the British look to the United States for leadership, and I think this is not an example really of where we're not seeing any of that leadership at the moment, and these are very confusing times, right? And I think that's people I talk to in England, that's how they feel about it too.
I saw that Boris Johnson was at the RNC this week,
Good.
and he was the mayor of London, and quite a colorful guy.
He was the mayor of London. Boris was the Daily Telegraph correspondent in Brussels when I was the BBC producer there.
Oh,
Many years ago.
Have you told your BBC story?
no, I have not.
Do you want to tell your BBC story?
Looks like I don't
Come
have a
on,
choice.
Kristi.
A few years ago, we were at a fundraiser in Minnesota for my canine charity, Canines for Cops, and there was quite a few. And NFL was hosting an event for us, so it's quite a few former NFL players and current NFL players there. So there was a man sitting next to me, and he played in the NFL, and he's in the Hall of Fame. And it's not that I'm protecting him. I just can't think of his name right now. And so he looks at me.
Let's see if I can get it.
Now, where I'm sitting at this table, there's probably 6 other NFL players sitting there. I can't tell you who anybody is because I don't know anything about sports stuff. And he said, do you like BBC? And I don't know how to
How to tell that story?
to
And
tell
you-
the story
well,
of what
you-
it stands for. I had never
Use
heard
your
of it.
imagination. But Kristi,
Immediately goes into media mode, and I'm thinking to myself, gosh, he's asking me about the BBC? I mean, he must have Googled me and realized that I used to be in broadcasting. My brain is working this fast. And I looked at him and I said, no, actually, I'm a Fox News girl. Well, I saw the look on everybody's face at the table, and I thought, what am I missing?
Yeah.
And one of the guys told the guy that told me this, he said, that's not very cool to do that. And I was thinking to myself, so then somebody informed me what BBC stood for.
If you need some clarification, just leave a little note in the comments, and I'll send you a
Yeah.
DM.
But you emerged with dignity intact. This is the most important.
Yeah, I didn't even know it. I was like Trump. I missed it by 15%.
I think the way that you responded, the joke was really on them.
It was.
Exactly,
It
right?
was.
But like I said, you emerged intact, and he's the one that looks foolish, I think, right?
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
I probably so. But I realized afterwards, I was like, yeah, I missed that one by I felt typical blonde moment.
Well, no. I mean, what could you have said anyway?
Yeah, you're right. If you had thought of a better comeback, you probably couldn't have thought of one that fast. But I was so surprised when he said that, because I was thinking, NFL player and he follows the BBC? Huh, maybe there's some soccer situation. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Ted Lasso was just the big thing. So I was like, maybe that has something to do with it. I was like, no, I'm a Fox News girl. So Mark, tell us about some of your other clients.
I have a really sort of big range of.
I mean, assuming you have some besides us.
Oh,
I just mean, we think we're your only clients.
Yeah. Well, no, he's got loads.
I know, but usually I wouldn't want to hear about them, but I'm interested now.
Well, so now what's great is that, since I left full-time work, I've been able to sort of divide my time between, helping people with their podcasts and their videos, and teaching. So, I'm doing some summer classes right now. The great thing about the podcast editing is that, you just encounter such a wide variety of people. So obviously I've got you guys twice a week, and we never know what to expect really from the guests. So, and often the show can take an unexpected turn, which I love as well, And so on another end of the spectrum, I have a sports company, a sports marketing company called Navigate, who do they do a weekly podcast, which is interviewing people, very, very senior people behind the scenes in sports franchises. But it's mostly, it's kind of a business podcast, really. I have a podcast called Resonance Rising. My client, really great guy called Ben Dabbin, who talks about health issues, often holistic health issues, not pills and exercise.
I sent him an email. Yeah, we have conversed via email. Yeah.
Yeah, Ben's show is really about, ways to heal the mind and body together. And he always has fascinating, amazing guests on that show, Resonance Rising. I have Arivi Vargas, who is my longest client now, longest relationship that I have in this business with Arivi. Has been going about 5 years now. She is kind of a coach, a career coach, chiefly for women of Hispanic origin in Boston. Mm-hmm. She encourages Hispanic women to speak up in meetings, to speak their minds, to climb the corporate ladder, to have more confidence, to feel less guilty, all those kind of things. So it's a sort of coaching, inspiring kind of podcast. So yeah, there's a few of them. But, getting back to the whole, launch a podcast sort of thing, one of the things that I've discovered is that, people are either in it for the long run or they get fed up really quickly. So, a lot of people will start full of ambition, full of energy, and realize that it takes work.
Right.
It takes thought. It takes planning. It takes, regular attention. It's kind of like having a pet, really, right? You've got to feed it. And you got to exercise it. And so a lot of people give up very easily.
Yes, they said that the average person only lasts like 4 to 5 shows.
Yeah. So when you see all these statistics that are out there saying, oh, there are 3 gazillion podcasts in the world, most of them are dormant. I think I read somewhere something in about 60% of podcasts are dormant, which means that they're sort of sitting there. People are not doing new episodes. They've just recorded a bunch of stuff and it's sitting there. So there are those people. But then there are other people who do it for fun. There are people who just do it for fun. There are people who do it to make connections, and there are people who do it for business reasons, to market their business, to showcase their business. I think the best reason to launch a podcast is to demonstrate to people the sorts of possibilities that there are out there in your fields. You know, what interests you, what's interesting about the life that you and your guests lead. What kind of connections can you make through that? You know, this is how it differs from broadcasting. Broadcasting was very much, and maybe this is because I worked for the BBC for so long, but broadcasting is very much a sort of, we say it and you listen. You know, we'll tell you what's important and you'll listen to it and you'll go away and think about it. But that's broadcasting, right? Podcasting is very much a two-way thing. It's very much a two-way thing. It's a communicative thing. It's tell me about it's about curiosity. Tell me about your life. Tell me who your friends are. Tell me who you've met. Tell me what motivates you. And to get a sort of a two-way conversation going and then expand it to other people with similar interests.
You know, we've kind of seen podcasts really evolve in the last 10 years. And now people that are starting podcasts we're going to more visual stimulation, like YouTube, along with the audio form. What do you see, or if anything, what do you see podcasting turning into?
What's the song, Kristi? Video Kill the Radio.
Radio Star, the very first song ever played on MTV.
Yeah, the Buggles.
Yeah.
I think podcasting will be fine. I think, you know, YouTube is very big. Almost everybody that comes to me now wants to be on YouTube. And again, it looks easy. It looks easy. It's not, you know. It needs thought and love. And you need to think about the aesthetics and the look and sound and feel and the tone and what kind of image you want to project, you know. So, you know, YouTube done well, you could think, oh, my God, this will take over the world, you know. But I think podcasting will be fine. You can multitask while you're listening to something, right? So, you know, I typically listen to radio and podcasts all my life while I've been driving in the car. When you're walking the dog, you can do it. When you're washing the dishes, when you're cleaning the house. You know, a lot of people just have it on for company, whereas video requires full attention, right? You're either watching the screen where the action is happening or you're not. And so there's really no middle ground there, whereas the ears are very clever in a way that the eyes aren't. There is one thing that worries me, though, and I've learned this over the years from teaching as well, is how resistant we have become to sound. One of the things I do with my students is I take them outside and I say, what can you hear? And they have to really be quiet and focus, and suddenly they'll say, there's a seagull. There's a car alarm, there's an air conditioning. But, you know, these are all things that we have filtered out of our lives. We don't know what the sounds are around us anymore. And that's one of the interesting things. And I know Reagan, your producer, will know this, that there are all sorts of sounds in the room that you don't notice until you play the tape back.
Right. You're like, where in the hell did that noise come from?
Yeah, which is why, you know, one of the things I tell video production people is always ask for silence, because there's no such thing. There will be a buzzing light, a refrigerator, an air conditioner. There will be something, right? We used to have a joke in the BBC that every time we filmed outside, a bunch of people with pneumatic drills would appear to dig up the road.
Right.
From central casting, you know, oh, here they are, just as we're ready to start, you know.
Of course, when we start, we want silence. But remember, in radio, the worst thing you can ever have is dead air.
Right.
Yeah. So you want silence, but you don't want dead air.
That's right. Yeah. There's the critical difference, right?
Well, and, you know, even going back to the whole podcast versus YouTube thing, I think just the amount of studying you've done is I think it's a lot harder maybe to get out of the gate with a strictly audio podcast only. Like building that audience is going to take you a little bit more time probably. And I think if you're somebody that wants to launch into any kind of branding, marketing, basically a platform where you're providing other services, YouTube is going to be the best avenue to then transfer an audience to a place like Instagram or TikTok or one of those places where you're offering, you know, ideas on skincare products or whatever. You're not going to really get that same traffic from just an audio podcast. So knowing what you want to do with it on the back end also before you start, you know, and so, yeah, so if you're doing an audio and a visual podcast with YouTube, yeah, it might cost you more and be a little bit more of a time consuming thing out of the gate. But what you're able to do with it longevity wise is going to also have a different payoff completely.
And the fact that you can go back to a playlist and say, oh, you know, I have certain podcasts that I go to and I try to check in. And if they have a certain guest on, you know, I'll make it a priority. But, you know, one of the ones I like is Joe Rogan. Of course, he's the number one podcast. So you always look, I don't play golf. I love to watch golf inside in the air conditioning, outside of the sun. I want to watch Tiger Woods. I want to watch John Daly. I want to watch Rory when he wins. I want to watch Scotty. And you know, Mark, because you and I are kind of golf nerds.
Yeah.
And get excited, and I'll send you something about golf, then you'll send me something. I do not play golf, but I appreciate how difficult it is and that they can make it look so effortless. I find that fascinating. And so I was watching, Joe Rogan had on Mr. Beast, I don't know, in the past week. And it could have been prior to that. And again, it was on a playlist that I just pulled it up. And so Mr. Beast was telling him, he was fascinated with how, you know, he had 200 million followers. And he'd been doing this since he was 11 years old. And he said, we dub all these in Portuguese, in Spanish. And, you know, he started going into about the different languages.
He said only 10% of the population speaks English. He's like, so when I realized that only 10% was able to consume my content, he was like, I was on the pulse. I
found that fascinating. And I saw Joe Rogan's face, and he's like, you're kidding. And he goes, yeah, I don't know why y'all don't do this. He wasn't being condescending. He was just, I don't know why you wouldn't do this, because what you say resonates in any language. It would just, he said, well, I'd be afraid that somebody wasn't saying it right. And he goes, yeah, but I built the software for that. And he said, we use it inside, you know, in our team. And he says, we've gotten it down pretty good. But you could see the light take off in Joe Rogan's eyes. Like, he's right.
Yeah.
And I was like, we just had a learning moment.
There's a company that I've been talking to called 11 Labs who are doing just this. They're kind of taking people's voices and cloning them and having them speak in other languages. And so we tried this with one of my clients who is from Puerto Rico. But when she played back the Puerto Rican version, or, you know, the Hispanic version of her podcast to her friends in Puerto Rico, they said, you sound like you're in Barcelona. And so there's the challenge they have.
Right.
They're right there, because, you know, I mean, and then think about what you do in India, for instance, where there are so many cultures, religions, subcultures, languages. You know, if we want to speak to people in language that they will accept and understand as their own, you know, that's the big challenge, I think, is the geography challenge. But it definitely has huge potential, really does. But for now, I think it's, you know, subtitles, right?
Well, and honestly, it's just time and energy and research. I mean, that was the other thing that Mr. Beast said, is that when he and his friends got started, I think there was another 4 guys with him. Yeah. And they literally spent every day locked inside for 1,000 days.
1,000 days.
All they did was research, like how, like, you know, I mean, go watch the Joe Rogan episode. I don't even want to, you know, bastardize it by saying the wrong thing, but just the things that they studied and the amount of energy and effort
was fascinating.
They put into learning the algorithms and the methods. Like, if you want to do this and have it be successful, it takes a concentrated. And I'm only saying this because I feel like the amount of people who've reached out and said, "Oh, I think I'd like to do it."
Yeah.
If we knew the amount of work before we did it, we'd still do it. But I think we would have been better prepared. And I think it's just trying to convey that message to anybody who thinks, yeah, let me kick off. Save yourself a little bit of time. call somebody like Mark, get in touch with somebody like Mark that has done the effort, that knows the history, that knows how to present this, launch it the right way, and let Mark give you all the tips and the tricks. The other thing, Mark, is no, it's true. I mean, we wouldn't be where we are without you.
Right.
And getting back.
We love you, Mark.
To that educational piece is, Mark, having been a professor, at Georgetown, he's putting together this whole kit basically of like help yourself educational courses, but kind of like common sense things maybe for people who've been in the industry for a while. So if you want a quick start guide of how do I do this, and I'll let him explain it more, but you're getting ready to start this whole educational series to help people help themselves a little bit more.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's really, the thought for that really came from COVID and the notion that, people were sitting in their bedrooms like estranged from each other, talking online and talking on FaceTime and like we are now a lot of the time. And so it's really about how to use those connections effectively, not just in our social lives, but also in business as well. But also, how to relate to people in the real world. And I find, in my kind of interactions with the younger generations, when they tend to use different means of communication than we did. It's aimed at trying to encourage younger people to choose the method of communication that's most appropriate, and not to be misunderstood, and to recognize the value of, sincerity and truth really in social media and in communications in general. So, like Alissa, it's very good of you to mention it. And it's coming out at the end of August, hopefully. And it will be little how-tos about communication, everything from launching a podcast through, how to do a meeting on Zoom and how to emerge intact. But going back to what you said a while ago about video and audio, for people starting out, I would say now the question about video is why not? There are very few good reasons. If you're going to do a podcast, there are very few good reasons for just doing audio only. Some people lack the confidence to appear on camera. Some people don't want to, they want to do the recording at 6 o'clock in the morning in their PJs, right? And they don't want to go to that.
Who says you can't wear your PJs?
Sometimes I sleep in these, okay?
Well, you
don't judge.
You two always look fabulous, but you have to, again, it's an extra effort, isn't it? And then there are a couple of good reasons for just doing audio. The other one is the intimacy that audio has. And if you think about your favorite podcasts or your favorite radio shows, there's an intimacy about just a conversation, between two people who don't constantly have eye contact, because it puts that extra pressure on expressing yourself kind of verbally when you don't have that eye contact. And so that gives something extra special with radio. And then there are those radio stories that really come to life through the way that the sound is used. I always play my students an NPR story done by one of their hosts, a guy called Steve Inskeep, hosts the morning show, who went to New Orleans and just, did a story about a neighborhood in New Orleans. And it's full of sounds. There's an ice cream truck, kids playing, doorbells ringing, footsteps, cats meowing, dogs barking. And it takes you there. Just hearing the sounds, you actually are transported to this place without even seeing it.
All right. Well, Mark, for everybody listening, watching that decides they want a podcast, tell everybody how they can find you, because they need you.
They can find me very easily on LinkedIn at Mark McDonald US, and or my website, which is markmcdonald.us.
Or you can reach out to Liss N Kristi, and we'll be happy to provide his email address.
And we will link all of his information at the bottom.
Actually, he will link all of his
Yes, you will link. And then a place for people to subscribe and sign up and follow and all the great.
Yeah, and I will help. I'm notorious for, a weakness of mine, which is kind of helping people getting started.
Mark, we thank you for jumping on.
Welcome. You're welcome. I mean, this is, it's a medium that anybody really can do, with some planning and some forethought,
right?
And some passion, and authenticity. And the most important thing about podcasting is curiosity. You have to be curious about people or the world. random, whatever it is. Curiosity is the key to succeeding.
Thank you for that little nugget, because that
I
was
know.
about to be the question I asked you. But curiosity is the key to success.
I think so.
Well, Mark, we appreciate you so much taking your afternoon to spend it with us.
Oh, you guys are great. I love this. I love this ride that we're on with this podcast. And
Yep.
I'm always
We're
trying
getting
to
there.
thinking of ways that we can move forward.
Okay.
All right. Well, say goodnight, Lucy.
Good night, Lucy.